Tom, a couple of different places to start today. We're hearing more and more of a buzz over Jean Charest. This has been now going on for weeks. So what's the latest on this as far as what you hear?
Well, it's interesting because it's essentially the same strategy that Charest adopted in 1998 when he was being brought in as the leader of the Quebec Liberals. Is it going to happen? Will he accept? Will there be a contest? I can tell you that very senior Liberals had warned us in advance that this was going to happen. And I can also tell you that they broke arms and legs to make sure that nobody ran against him, because that was the deal they had made with Charest. If he comes in, there would be a red carpet and there would be no contest. This time, there'd be a contest. And the rules last time required, to say whether or not, for example, you were being investigated, and that was one of the things that I believe contributed to his decision not to run. Are there going to be similar rules this time, and what would his answer be? Because, of course, he's still complaining, and there's even a series of lawsuits that have been talked about that apparently try to force the issue with the Quebec government. So we'll see if he does do it. I have every indication from every source that I've talked to that he is going. He's brought together a team. This is no accident the way this thing was rolled out today. It was well prepared, and it's exactly the type of thing you do when you're getting ready to go and you want to create a bit of buzz.
I want to just ask one question from a name that I did hear, and I think we all heard at the beginning, and really have not heard much since as a potential leader, and that's Peter MacKay. Is this old news now?
The problem with Peter MacKay, or the problem for Peter MacKay, it's not that he's not a talented guy. He's been senior minister of a bunch of things, defense and justice. As a justice minister, I have to say he was really good. But the problem with Peter MacKay is he's never made it a priority to learn any French. And when I say any French, I mean any French. You might recall when he launched his campaign, he had memorized a 3-word line, which was supposed to be, I am a candidate. He managed in the French version of that to make 3 mistakes. And that was the beginning of the end. Nobody could take him seriously. Nobody thought that this guy could ever take part in a debate in French. And so that's one of his problems. So it's going to be interesting to see where he lands, because, of course, Charest's got a lot of business contacts now. He's worked his way up the ladder. He's just recently put on the board of directors of the Canadian National Railways, of CN. So, these are jobs that pay a lot of money. You get $400,000 a year for being on the board of CN. Is he going to give all that up? Looks like he might be willing to. And is he going to have a lot of contacts? You bet. He knows a lot of people in corporate Canada, and maybe that's the type of thing that would come out in his favor. For example, to keep somebody like MacKay away, although if MacKay comes in, he'll be selling memberships that would make Charest their second or third choice because they'd be anti-Poilievre, so that might actually work out in some respects. The real big question mark, I have to say, Natasha and Aaron, what is Stephen Harper going to do? Last time, very clear messages were sent by Harper that he was extremely unhappy with the thought of Jean Charest coming in. He's also making a ton of money in the corporate sector now. Is he going to be softer in his criticism? Will he keep his powder dry? That's what remains to be seen, because he still holds a lot of sway with the Reform Party types, the ones from Western Canada.
So, Tom, what effect does this letter have? Does this letter from these Conservative MPs saying that Jean Charest is really the only person who's suited to this role, does that counter any Harper reaction?
Yeah, and it would force Harper to be a little bit more prudent in his reaction, too, because it's being set up in such a way that you'd be essentially taking a shot at Quebec votes and Quebec MPs if you try to dismiss it out of hand and say this guy doesn't represent what the party has become. It's precisely because Charest doesn't represent what the party has become that he's going to be an interesting candidate for anybody who actually thinks that forming a government is a good idea to be in politics. That's the problem with ideologues like Poilievre. He doesn't care whether or not he forms a government. He wants to be right in an argument. Well, at some point, you've got to realize that politics is the art of the possible, something that Charest knows well.
I want to shift to something that seems to be getting closer and closer to and exploding to that tinderbox that's going to explode. And obviously that's the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. That staged press conference yesterday by Putin where he's saying all these ministers sitting around him in that giant hall did not know why he was asking them, or he'd not gone to them first and said, I need you to tell me this is okay to do, as if. Look, Joe Biden went out again today and said, based on what we're now seeing and the fact that the Russians are going to move into those eastern parts of Ukraine and declare them basically sovereign states, it would seem, is just another indication that a full-out invasion is going to come. Canada, and this is the part I'm a little concerned with. I know we said we're going to give them money. We're going to send we're not sending troops, but we're saying military personnel to areas around Ukraine. Should we be doing more? And why aren't they, or why won't they specify what the financial sanctions, the economic sanctions are going to be, instead of just talking generally around them?
Well, I'll go to the last question first. And I think that the reason why Biden is holding some of his fire is that he has to have some final cards to play if Putin goes all the way. Let me explain. If he were to restrain himself to those two eastern parts of Ukraine that are absolutely part of Ukraine, there's no question that this is a flagrant violation of international law. But he's going to argue that he's going in to help the Russian-speaking population that's suppressed. He even had the temerity to say that these were peacekeepers. I mean, what a horrible abuse of that expression. So that's what this is. It's an aggressive war against Ukraine. It's an invasion, as Biden correctly said. But to the extent that there's still some hope being held out that he might stop there and not try to go into Kiev and not try to take the whole country, then it's worth the effort to hold back on some of those sanctions that you can always apply in full sweep afterwards. The real concern, of course, from the Ukrainians is part of that endless meandering speech that Putin gave yesterday, where he said, Ukraine doesn't exist. It's just something that the communists and the Bolsheviks invented, and Ukraine's always just been part of Russia. So if that's his fundamental thinking, and I think that's what he was trying to communicate, then there's every reason to fear that he might go all the way.
How scary, I mean, to have someone simply say, as you just said, Tom, you know what, whatever this country is, it doesn't really exist, based on something that existed 200 years ago. You know, I think a lot of people now wonder, if he goes ahead and does this, what's next? And if no one's going to stop him militarily, how far can he keep going?
Well, I mean, that's why Canada and the other NATO allies are shoring up the borders right now. The Baltic states, for example, you can imagine how nervous they are in Poland, to give that one example. But there was an interesting phrase in Biden's speech today that everybody's remarking on. He essentially said, Ukraine's not part of NATO, and no, we're not going to start a war with Russia over Ukraine. I mean, that was sad for Ukraine, but at least had the merit of being fair. But then he went on to say this: we will defend as one all of NATO, every single inch of every NATO country. So those Baltic states, those small states like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, they feel some relief, because Canada's even got quite a large number of troops there right now. So we're going to continue doing what we have to do to shore up the defenses of NATO. Germany came out very strongly, immediately announced that they were canceling the permitting process for this massive Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline that was going to give lots of foreign cash reserves to the Russians, and it was a big element of their economy, and the Germans canceled it right away. So they showed quite a bit of resolve. It was a bit sad to see that Biden tried to take credit for it, almost as if he was trying to say that he was the one who told the Germans what to do. I think that was a slip-up on the part of Biden. All
right, so just as we're speaking, Tom, the federal government has called a press conference. Actually, Chrystia Freeland is speaking right now. I want you to hear what Justin Trudeau has just said with respect to sanctions against Russia. Brian?
In coordination with allies and like-minded partners, Canada is announcing a first round of economic sanctions. We will ban Canadians from all financial dealings with the so-called independent states of Luhansk and Donetsk. We will sanction members of the Russian parliament who voted for the illegal decision to recognize these so-called republics. We will ban Canadians from engaging in purchases of Russian sovereign debt. And we will apply additional sanctions on 2 state-backed Russian banks and prevent any financial dealings with them.
Okay, there's Justin Trudeau literally moments ago on sanctions against Russia. Tom, do these really matter?
No, they don't. But the term that he used when he said the first round, it goes back to the conversation we were just having. They're clearly trying to keep some of their powder dry, trying to keep some of it in reserve in case the Russians go the whole 9 yards. And so trying to hold back on some of this, I think, is a wise approach. But the short answer to your question, Aaron, they couldn't give a fig about Canadian sanctions. It's not going to change anything in their economic or otherwise lives.
And what about the U.S. ones where Biden talks about freezing oligarchs' accounts? Will that make a difference of any kind?
It can, because they've stashed lots of money. If there's one group of people who fear Putin and his dictatorship, it's the people who have made a lot of money thanks to Putin and his dictatorship.
Right.
And they've stashed tens of billions of dollars each in the United States that they'd love to be able to call upon. So, yes, they're very worried.
Okay. Tom Mulcair. Tom, thank you so much.
Good to talk to you.